All right, so I'm kind of putting this together hastily, out of order, but follow along with me. This is the control assembly for a Terex Hi-Ranger. I think it's like a 5T or a 6T. This might be one of the only videos on YouTube on how to repair one of these, but if you have issues with the trigger, specifically when you're trying to control the bucket, when you squeeze the airlock release, there is a closed valve assembly that's up inside the control head. I'll post pictures and I'll take a video when it's actually reassembled, but this is broken down all the way. Basically, the most common part to go out is going to be like a $3 packing assembly. It is the difference between these two. So this is a brand new assembly and this is a used assembly. You basically just see that the rubber has worn out and the flare is much more prominent on the brand new assembly. This is a brass coupling. This is actually I guess the air cylinder itself. What happens is this, when you squeeze the trigger, will compress against a spring that is inside this air cylinder and press air out of this little tube, which then goes down through your like carriage adjustment, and then that runs down to the master airlock, which makes sure that you actually have someone up in the bucket running the controls. If you don't squeeze the trigger, you don't press the air. If you don't press the air, you don't unlock the controls. So the problem we were having, it's an older unit. The air assembly would work occasionally. So especially if it was like first thing in the morning when it's cold or wet, this was basically hard. If it would sit out in the sunlight for a little bit, it would loosen up, and it hadn't been serviced very well. We'll go over that. Basically just use 3-in-1. It's actually in the schematic for repair. You use 3-in-1 oil and you drop it through this little hole right here, right there, and it will drop and cover your assembly. But I'll go over sources. I'll post a bunch of pictures and talk over them. But we're going to kind of rebuild this and show you the way. If you wanted to buy this whole assembly, it's like, I think like over $1,000, maybe $1,300. If you want to take it apart, I actually got quotes as of 2025. The shaft and piston assembly, which is the silver machined component, which is actually decently complicated, but you could manufacture it yourself. They are $140. The air cylinder itself, which is this brass component, which that's just a closed cap with a friction fitting. I will go over that. They are $260, $230. The spring, which there's a brand new spring here, and there's brand used right there. Those are $63. The control cover with sleeve, which is the cap for the back of it, goes on the back. It doesn't actually hold air. It's just literally covering it. And it allows the bushing basically to ride on top of this coupling and keep the cap to like keep dirt and crap out. That's $130. The packing itself, which is the culprit of all the problems, is $264. That's that thing. And then the trigger handle, which is a very common thing to go out because this little tiny tab, see it down there at the bottom, that little tiny tab right there, that grabs, one sec. The little tiny tab that grabs and stops this from being pressed all the way out, that will break off. It's pretty common. That's a $6 part for the trigger assembly, and you can just do like a trigger versus the full grip. And then there's a little plastic dowel pin, which in our case is a metal roll pin. But there's a little Delrin bushing right here that you can just buy anywhere and have machined. But that little roll pin is $3. So a little bit bigger than what goes on an AR. Either way, all right, I'm gonna start assembling just a little bit and I'll come back. Actually, I forgot. We went on eBay and there's a guy that I guess like services Terex stuff, specifically the Hi-Ranger, because you know it's pretty hard to come by a guy who wants to mess with one of them. He sells full assemblies for like $250. So this is $230. And so if you buy the whole assembly, everything for $250, you're pretty much squared away. All of these tie rods are held in with like cross pins and like little cotter pins. So when you take out the cotter pins, just buy yourself a new pack. They're brass when they come from the factory, but you can just get stainless. They can be lost pretty easily, but you just take all the screws out, take the cotter pins out, and the whole assembly will kind of lift up and out. But if you want to swap out the whole assembly, it's just friction fit right in there. These are like a universal mount from the factory, but there is a specific way that it goes in, and I'll show pictures of like a normal assembly. And I like zip tie stuff like I'm doing hydraulic lines. But if you want to get this out, you can throw it in a vise and like squeeze with like a 9mm socket and press it out. I did like the heat method because I didn't have a bench vise with me. I ended up just heating this with like a blue tank propylene, like plumber's torch, and then just hitting it like you're doing lug nuts with some wax. It gets in there pretty well, and then I just hammered it out with a piece of wood, and that's the old one right here. There is, when you do reassemble this, there is a gap, if you'll notice, right here, that gap right there. That gap is fine because you don't want to crush this copper tube coming out like they did on this one, where it's crushed and bent and then inside is marred. So whoever serviced this or repaired this drove this fucker home, and that's not nice. Your tolerances can actually be adjusted by hammering this further in, and when you want to reinstall this, you can run like a 20mm socket in here with like a 3/8 extension through a vise, and so you'll push here on one side of the vise and then run the socket through, I guess kind of simulating like your socket extension goes there and pushes all the way through. Or you just get yourself like a dowel. Sorry, I just cut the video. Get yourself a wooden dowel that's, like what, 5/8, and run it across the face with like a washer or something, and then just hammer it home. Just make sure that you have a little bit of step off, because this does protrude just a little bit. So if you're hammering on a flat bench, you got to make sure you actually push it all the way home. But you're just going to go based on that. If you had like an arbor press, that would work too, but I didn't. So yeah, Shade Tree Mechanic, sorry about you. All right, give me a second. If you look at the reference photos that I'll post here, basically you're going to have the spring. I covered it in some grease because it's going to stay oiled, but I just like to have grease on it. I use like agricultural red grease. 3-in-1 oil all over this gasket. You'll place this entire assembly through the cap, the cylinder head cover, and then that entire assembly in here, because you have to like slot the whole thing in. You can't just like piecemeal it as you go in. You're gonna press all the stuff in. You'll take a little pick and run this inside edge in so you don't catch it like you would an O-ring. And then you'll take your little Delrin spacer and you'll shove it in the back, if you look at the reference photo. So I find it's easier to line up the entire assembly without this O-ring or gasket being pressed in, and then take your trigger and just run it in as like an inline stabilizer, because these little tie rods get all up in the way. Helps if you have a vise, but I don't. Not right now. It's too cold. It's like 19 degrees outside. To get everything kind of in place, again, you're just waiting on the gasket. I prefer to use one of the 90-degree picks. Icon makes good affordable ones that are snap-on quality and just as replaceable. And yeah, you just run the pick around the surface and it should plunge in. So the plunger's in. That black cap that's right there will free float, and I'll show you later. But basically you're gonna now hold here, holding this like bushing down, because it is spring loaded, and I'll show you the function afterwards. But you'll take out your pistol grip and throw your Delrin bushing on to lock it all in, and then you'll put your roll pin back in. All right, now that I'm hands free, the Delrin bushing actually kind of holds against the spring, and it's kind of like a self-contained unit now. And at what point you can start to fiddle with it, but for now I'm just going to leave it alone so it doesn't pop out. I get all my tie rods out of the way, and then I work on aligning this pistol grip correctly with that hole. There's a second hole that holds like a, I think it's a limiter for like the push rod that's in here, because the push rod rests against that part of the piston that sticks out, and then the push rod is actually split. I don't know if I can show you. Let's see if I can get the light in there. Yeah, there you go. It's split to go around the roll pin and pushes against it. That's dirty as heck. You can throw some grease in there if you want, but oil's probably fine too. But yeah, we'll get it reassembled. To put the roll pin back in, you can honestly just kind of like start it with your finger. And then I just have a couple different sizes of punches. So I've got a 4mm, a 5, and a 3. And they all kind of work pretty well. The 5 is for driving it home once it's started, and the 3 and the 4 are kind of for running up on one of the edges. If you have like an AR assembler's like armor's kit, you can run like the actual like roll pin start pin that has like the cup that goes around the outside. But there's a surprising amount of play. If all of this assembly is super tight, take that to like a belt sander and grind off like a millimeter of the Delrin. Because it doesn't have to be super tight, because once this pin is in place, this tolerance is pretty well set. And the piston assembly is pretty deep into the air chamber. So like your seal is on the front edge, and so, you know, it's got a good gap. And then again, yeah, if you really need to, you just take this whole thing out again and drive that gap, make that smaller. So you've got 2mm there. You'll just have to worry about crimping your copper tube. And we're back to the reference photo. So for getting this roll pin out, it's pretty straightforward. You just, again, take a 3mm and run it on the edge. It shouldn't round it over pretty well, but I've taken this pin in and out like 5 times now, and it doesn't deform very well because you really don't need that much force. If you have issues, just throw some 3-in-1 on it, or some like PP blaster or something. But from this point, you can actually service this like head by putting like 3 or 4 drops. I'll show you the schematic that we have from the truck, but you can see basically just soaks in the oil, and then you can test it by squeezing. And now I have to rebuild this because the piston is stuck. But yeah, that's the problem we're having, is that our piston's stuck. So I have to basically fix the tolerance of this hole right here. It's too tight. But, you know, it's not too bad. I'll be back when it actually functions properly. So actually, upon like further inspection, my problem is this little piston that's in here on the grip. To test it, you basically just squeeze, and you should feel air come out of that little tiny hole. You can actually, like, it's a good amount of air. My problem I'm having is it works, but down in this hole, again, get the light, down in that hole, I don't have enough hands. There you go. It's just full of gunk. So I'm gonna probably spray that out, take it off, spray it out, clean it up, see if I can possibly take it apart. I think I need to take off the trigger. If I were to take off that pin, I think the trigger pin would come back out. I'm not sure, but they don't give you schematics on that part, on how to assemble it. Disassemble it, you just gotta buy a whole new one. And the whole pistol grip's like several $100s, so don't break it, don't be too aggressive with it. But yeah, I think it's just gummed up right here. So this part works fine. This is reassembled and blowing the air that I need, and this little $3 part is no longer stopping the master airlock from working. As far as rebuilding it, I'll show you, but you're basically going to use these self-tappers with the nose cut off, and these nylock nuts, and then this is like a range of motion adjustment that uses 6/32 1/2 flange heads. So in case you lose one like we did, pretty easily replaceable standard screw. I just did slots because that's what they had at Tractor Supply. So there you go. So speak of the devil, basically this entire thing was gummed up with grit all the way down in that channel right there. It was just full of like grime, like oil and packed dirt. It actually ground down the aluminum, put a nice little corner on it. So I'm gonna chuck this up in my drill and hit it with some sandpaper and just get it back to somewhat of a tolerant grind, because you can see there's some pretty nice scrapes in there if it'll focus. But yeah, see if I can clean that up just a bit. I spoke incorrectly earlier. This is the plastic pin. It's a couple bucks for the trigger. You can see some of the grit and oil that's all over the trigger. Basically just plastic breakdown. This had broken off. That is nowhere to be found now, but that had broken off and gotten wedged. So that's cool. But then that little tab is what I was talking about earlier that breaks off. So just be careful taking them apart. If they sit in the sunlight forever, they'll dry rot from UV breakdown. But I'll clean this up, reassemble, and then, like I said, that bushing right there, that nylock bushing, holds the whole thing together. So it's kind of cool. All right. All right, and that's the same part after I hit it with some 120, some, excuse me, 240, and then some Scotch-Brite in a drill. Pretty good. Yeah, so some of the gunk that came out of there, that's some of the stuff that was gumming up the action. I'm going to try and do this in one take. I doubt it'll work out. Basically the top of the aluminum housing, it's just those two bolts. You just pass them through. They go through the holes. You can't really see them very clearly. On the top side you kind of can near that tie rod, but they just go outwards with the lock nuts. This is one of the schematics. Just pause it, take a screen cap on your phone or iPad or whatever, and it just kind of shows you how it's all built. This is a close-up of another schematic. You got some information about how to lubricate it, what they want you to lubricate it with. Got the troubleshooting guide. It's kind of how we figured out some of the problems, but the reality is you just got to get in there. And this is just the air assembly for the pneumatic system, so you can kind of wrap your head around how it's all built. And the rest of the service manual. So, all right, best of luck.